Welcome to today's lecture. In today's lecture, we will be coming back to the our objective of finding low dimensional approximation of high dimensional data. The main agenda for today's lecture is the concept of random projections. So this is the main agenda of today's lecture. So what we will be doing is that just recalling what we had discussed is that we have our data which we express in terms of a matrix which has n many rows which denote the n data points that we have, and each row is d-dimensional. Okay, so d-dimensional. So each data point is d-dimensional and we have n many rows. So in today's lecture, when we say random projections, what we will do is that we will create another matrix. So the dimension of this matrix is n cross d. We'll create another matrix of dimensions d cross k, where each column will be d-dimensional now. We will pick the columns in a specific way, and the resulting matrix that we have will be n cross k, which we will call as an approximation of the original data matrix. Okay, so we have basically from n cross d we have moved to n cross k. Okay, so this is the a big picture of what we are trying to do, and the main idea that we will be discussing today, along around which all our discussion today will be, is to pick k many d-dimensional Gaussians. So for these Gaussians are the standard Gaussians, which will have zero mean, unit variance. So we will stack these Gaussians as the column vectors of the matrix, of this matrix. So if, let's say, if this is the matrix P, then we will pick k many d-dimensional Gaussians independent, and we will stack them and to form this matrix, and whatever that happens. Okay, and what such a projection will do is that it will also give us some guarantees. So the guarantee that it gives us is that all the pairwise distances are approximately the same. Okay, so after the all the projection business is over, the guarantee that we get is that pairwise distances are approximately preserved. Okay, so if we look at SVD, in SVD we had sort of a global guarantee that the Frobenius norm of the resulting K rank approximation will be the best, and so on and so forth. Here we are not talking about a global guarantee, but we are, in a way, we are talking of a local guarantee that all the pairwise distances. So for example, in d dimensions, if we pick two vectors vi and vj, if they had a certain distance, then even in k dimensions the distance between the two vectors will be approximately the same. Okay, so one of the uh, if you need an application based motivation, then we can look at the nearest neighbor search, in the sense that if we want to find uh, if the distance denotes how near two data points are, then rather than checking that distance in the d dimensions, we will check it in the k dimensions, so that everything happens quicker. Okay, because the dimension is reduced, everything happens quicker. So this is what we are going to do. Just to again summarize what we'll do, is that we will answer the following questions. The first question that we will be addressing is that what is it about Gaussians that makes it work? Okay, because we specifically picked the spherical Gaussians, we'll see what spherical Gaussians mean. But the first question which we want to understand is that what is it about Gaussian that makes the whole projection business work? Then the second question is that how do we pick K? Okay, this is the second question. For a given n, does every K work? If it works, how good it is, how bad it is? Do we have any guarantees? Okay, and it might also be useful when we talk about picking K to just draw a parallel in terms of what happened in SVD. I'll probably give that as a homework problem. Then in the third part, what we want is that proof that pairwise distances are preserved. Okay, so these are the three things, three big level questions that we will be addressing in today's lecture. What we do not answer is that is it just Gaussian or do other distributions also work? Okay, so this is an important question which has been answered in the literature. This was once a research topic where people have published papers on is it just Gaussian or another thing. So maybe I'll give that in the homework or maybe in the exam, who knows. And but we will not be addressing this question in today's lecture. Okay, so then now going forward with our agenda, the first thing that we discuss today is high dimensional Gaussians. Okay, in the literature this is also known as multivariate Gaussian. So this will be our first topic of discussion. So if you look at the standard density function, this density function of a high dimensional Gaussian is given. So if we are considering a d-dimensional Gaussian, then it will be exponential. I'm sure you would have seen this before. Okay, but d is the dimension, x is the vector x1 to xd, mu is the mean, sigma is the variance matrix. So now we will pick all the vectors independently. We are interested in zero mean, standard variance, unit variance, and all those things, those standard stuff that we do to simplify stuff. So when we do those things, let's say zero mean, unit variance, and all the components are independent. All the components are independent, then what we get is okay, so we can write this as Okay, because X transpose X is the 2 norm, which we can also write it as mod, but it is basically the Euclidean distance of the point X transpose X. So one thing which is obviously clear from just the definition is the observation that the density, the probability density depends only on the length of the vector. Okay, it is clear from the definition itself. So if we have zero mean, unit variance, independence, and all these things, then such a multivariate Gaussian is often referred to as a spherical Gaussian. If you look at the book, they generally refer to it as spherical Gaussian. And the reason why it is called spherical Gaussian is because it is symmetric. So if we draw it in 2 dimensions, if we draw a Gaussian in 2 dimensions, if we draw this Gaussian in a 2 dimension and look at the probability distribution from the top, then we will get something like concentric circles. Okay. And we have already seen from this observation that the probability density depends only on the distance. So it only depends on the distance from the origin. If we have, because it is centered at the origin, then it only depends on the distance from the origin. So this is a very important observation. There is nothing complicated about this observation, but it is important just to understand how Gaussians work in the higher dimension. In the textbook, there is also some relation drawn between the volume of an n-dimensional sphere with the n-dimensional Gaussians. We sort of see why there is a relation. We will not discuss the volume of hypersphere and all those things in today's lecture, but just as an intuition or as a motivation that why these two concepts are related, we have mentioned it here. Okay, so moving on, uh, in our quest of understanding a few more properties of the high dimensional Gaussian, so let us consider this quantity. Okay, where xi is, we have a Gaussian x1 to xd, and we want to see what is the nature of the sum of those two things. For this purpose, we use the law of large numbers. Okay, we actually can do it just with Markov, then Chebyshev, going through the whole derivation again, because the derivation is just 2 lines. But we will directly use what we have seen earlier. So what we have is that okay, so this is like law. We can call it law of large numbers or Chebyshev inequality or whatever. So since they are all zero mean, we know that this is equal to 0. So what this? So when d tends to infinity, or when d becomes very high, what we know is that basically that the sum, it tends towards 0. So when how getting the d-dimensional Gaussian is that we are picking d many scalar Gaussians. And if we just let go of the vector perspective for now, we are just picking a large number of scalar Gaussians, and by law of large numbers, the sum or their mean should tend towards the true mean, which is zero in this case. So if we just think of this from a scalar perspective, then this is sort of obvious. Okay. Next, what we do is that we try to understand what about the distance. Okay. Next, we try to analyze this quantity because we have already seen that density, the probability density is closely associated with this. We again use the same analysis which we used earlier. So we will have something like this. Okay. Now to see how this behaves, there is one small observation or a note which you can verify at home, is that if x is a standard normal, then x square is a chi-square. It has a chi-square distribution with 1 degree of freedom. Okay. And for a chi-square distribution with 1 degree of freedom, we have that the expected value is 1 and the variance is 2. So you can verify this in your free time or whenever. So what? Okay, so here we will have expected value of xi square. So from chi-square distribution, we have that this is equal to 1 and this quantity is equal to 2. Okay, so same as we saw earlier, as d tends to infinity, the right hand side or the upper bound will tend to 0 as we increase d further. So what this basically means is that tends to d. Okay, because if we look at the quantity that is inside the norm, we are saying that 1 by d summation over xi square minus 1, it tends to 0. So the distance squared, it tends to d. So the observation that we have, the second key observation that we have is that high dimensional multivariate Gaussians have so I mean what we mean to say is that if we pick several multivariate Gaussians randomly, they all will have the same length root d with high probability. Okay, so what this intuitively means is that in the first observation, we saw that the density depends only on the length. Then in the second observation, we saw that if we pick a large number of Gaussians, if we sample randomly and all those things, then the length will almost be the same. Okay, So that is the thing. Okay, so length will almost be the same, and it depends only on the length. So there is some sort of symmetry or some sort of relation between what happens when we pick a large number of Gaussians. Okay, so next we continue with the same line of thought. Okay. And suppose we draw 2 points. Y and Z from d-dimensional, let's say standard Gaussian. I don't want to write zero mean and all those things again and again. Standard Gaussian, we mean that there are independence and all those things. Then from the observation above, we saw that the length and so these two things will happen with high probability. With the intuitive analysis that we saw above, we saw that these two things will happen with high probability. So then just let us look at so this term will go to 0 and we will be left with 2d. Okay, the expected value will be d with high probability. So the expected value of the distance squared will also be 2d with high probability. So again, we go to the law of large numbers analysis that we have. Then what we have is that probability. So this, when we say yi, zi, we mean the components of y for one particular component of y. So we now look at the distance between y and z. Okay. In the above observation, we looked at the property of a vector, one vector. Here we are analyzing the distance between two vectors. And we will have d epsilon square. Is that correct? We'll have d epsilon square, but it doesn't really matter. So this quantity we have as 2d, and this is bounded, so this will tend to 0. So whatever we do the whole analysis, this quantity is actually 2. Okay, yeah. So this, because this is an individual component, so what it means is that summation I is equal to 1 to d yi minus zi square will be equal to 2d with high probability. Okay. So the last argument in this whole endeavor is the following. Suppose we have y and z and we draw the vector y minus z. Will this be y minus z? Yeah, it doesn't. Let this be c. So z plus c is equal to y. C is equal to y minus z. Okay. Yeah. So we draw y minus z. Now what we have observed is that y square is the length of y square is d with high probability. Length, the squared length, not length of y square. The length of y, squared is d with high probability. Length of z, the squared length of z is d with high probability, and the squared length of y minus z is 2d with high probability. So these three things are actually satisfying the Pythagoras theorem with high probability. Okay, I hope it is clear that these three things are actually satisfying the Pythagoras theorem with high probability. We can also prove it more slightly more rigorously, but I think this is fine. So the third observation that we have is that so if we draw several vectors from the high dimensional Gaussians randomly, so they are perpendicular to each other with high probability. Okay, because d square plus sorry d plus d is equal to 2d, so it must be that the angle is 90 degree. We can also look at it from the vector, the parallelogram that we had, c square is equal to y square plus z square minus 2 z y cos theta. Now, since this is 2d, this is d, this is d, so this must tends to 0. But I don't think this is needed. It should be clear enough uh, by this example. So the three observations that we have is that the first observation was that the density depends only on the length of the vector, the joint density function. Then the second, observation was that high dimensional multivariate Gaussians have same length. So if we draw two vectors at random, they will have, there is a very high chance that they will have the same length, and there is also a very high chance that they will be perpendicular to each other. Okay, so these are the three uh, observations that we have. Now, what we are doing, if we combine these three observations again, then our projection matrix that we have. So let's say this is data, and we have a projection matrix, and whatever we get a low dimensional approximation. So the properties of the projection matrix are that the columns are perpendicular with high probability, same length with high probability. Okay, the probability depends. Okay, never mind. So we are familiar with this theme, although not exactly the same. We did something similar when we were doing singular value decompositions, where we picked columns that are perpendicular to each other, and they were supposed to be unit vectors, but let us just say that they are of the same length here. So we are sort of doing the same thing, but not exactly the same, because we are not measuring the largest projection and all those things. So this is in some way a randomized version of the singular value decomposition that we have. Okay, but this is a very informal way to say that it is a randomized version, because it is sort of difficult, because the guarantees are different. There we have global guarantees, here we have local guarantees. But just for our understanding, informal or intuitive understanding, we can look at it from the perspective of randomized. So it is randomized projection, but the guarantees are different. Okay. So in the next part, we go formal. So till now we were only talking about intuitive behavior, what it will be, and all those things. So we will now move the discussion to a more formal thing. So the first thing is that from the beginning of the lecture, recall that the probability density depends only on length. Okay, this is the first observation that we saw. We make this observation a bit more formal by the Gaussian analysis theorem. Okay, so what this Gaussian annulus theorem says is that if we have a d-dimensional spherical Gaussian, and that's standard thing, let's say with unit variance and zero mean and all those things, then the probability okay, so what this statement informally says is that then the probability that its length is too far away from root d is it decays off exponentially. Okay, so this is what we want to prove formally. So we by an informal discussion earlier we saw that the length will be root d with high probability. Here we are talking about how does the probability decays as we move to either side of root d. Okay, so we just quantify that decay, the decay of probability in this using these bounds and inequality. Okay, so for ease of I don't want to write norms again and again, so let us just write denote this as r because it is the radius of the spherical Gaussian or something like that. Then what we again go back to what we have been doing for the last two lectures is working with inequalities. So in the first step, we have just multiplied both sides by r minus root d, r plus root d, and those things. So then on the left hand side, we will get r square minus d, and on the right hand side, we can write this with this inequality. Okay, and the probability that it is greater than r plus root d is smaller than that it is greater than. You just think about this why this inequality is true. That is because Gaussian it decays due to the nature of Gaussian. Okay, so this is what we have. In the next step, we can open this inequality. Sorry, the expression for r, and we have x1 square. So I'll write a slightly bigger, and we have x1 square plus xd square minus d root d. Now we give one, we break d as an addition of ones, and we also divide it by 2. All these things will become clear. We need not have divided it by 2 in the single step, but when we go ahead, we'll see, okay, if we do it now, it will be better. Because, so if we, in the end, we will be using the master tail bounds theorem, which is given in the appendix of the book and the derivation of which we saw using the combinatorial arguments and all those things. So when we do that, we need to bound the moments of r of xi or yi, and for that we need to do change of variables and all those things. So having a 2 here will be helpful. So we have the inequality like this. Okay, so now as we saw that we want to use the master tail bounds theorem. So for that, first of all, we need that, uh, okay, yeah. So just to make it, we substitute xi square minus 1 by 2 is yi. This is what we do. So what we'll get is y1 plus y2 plus yd greater than equal to epsilon d epsilon root d by 2. Okay, so now this now looks something like the Master-Tailbound's theorem, but for it to work, a key to apply that bound directly, we need to prove that this is bounded. Okay, there it was bounded by r factorial sigma square. Yeah. So here when we do r factorial sigma square, this so we will have 2 or something because that is just the variance. Okay. So we can write YIS so this is less than or equal to uh, 1 plus xi power 2s by 2. Yeah. Okay. So we can write it like this. I hope it makes sense. This particular inequality, just think about it, why this is true, and we can write it here. Now, when we do expected value of then we have I will leave some of these inequalities for you to ponder about because we have looked at many of these things very carefully in the past few lectures. So we will have something like this. Okay, so we can actually just have one here. It doesn't make a difference because this is greater than sign. So we need to find the expected value of this quantity. So this is equal to 1 plus. We will have 2 to the s and okay, so we can write it something like that, something like this. So the limits we will have minus infinity to infinity, but since this is an even function, we can write it as 0 to infinity and 2 times of that. So the constant will change like this. Okay, so we will get something like this. Then we can do a change of variables where we put 2z is equal to x square. I mean, these are just standard calculus. Then we will have dz by root 2z is equal to dx. And when we do change of variables, we will have 1 plus okay. Because this root 2 will get cancelled with this root 2 and x square is just z and we have a root z here and when it goes above we will have z s minus 1 by 2 e raised to the power minus z dz. Okay. Now by gamma integral, by using those things and we get that s this is less than or equal to s factorial. Uh, this is not yeah, so this comes by the gamma integral, so you can work this out at home, whoever is writing this scribe may want to expand on why this inequality is true. So once this is less than or equal to s factorial, then we have proved, then we have sort of uh, satisfied the condition for the master for applying the master tail bounds theorem. Okay, so then when we apply the master tail bounds theorem, we look at the statement and all those things, then the bound that we get is minus epsilon square by 96. So this is there in the textbook also, but yeah, but that is not the objective of this lecture. So we're not stressing too much about the inequalities and all those things. We are looking at the big picture. Okay, so next that we have proved the Gaussian annulus theorem. So when we say we have proved the Gaussian annulus theorem, we know that there exists a C such that, yeah. So this is done. So next we move on to the random projection theorem. Next, we move on to the random projection theorem. So, what the theorem says is that we fix a vector v. So, in this theorem, we will prove the properties related to our projection. So, let us say we have a vector v, which is a fixed vector in Rd, a d-dimensional vector. Rather than considering the whole data matrix, we are just considering a vector and we'll prove it for that particular vector. Then we form our projection matrix by picking k many d-dimensional Gaussians. Okay, as discussed. Yeah. So let's just say that those Gaussians are u1, u2 till uk. Okay. Then the resulting projected vector f of v will be u1, the dot product of v with u1, the dot product of v with u2, and we will have uk v. Okay. Then the random projection theorem, it says that there exists C such that the probability okay. So this is the thing that we have. So if you look at the Gaussian annulus theorem, what it says that if we are in d dimension, then the length will be approximately d. When we take it to k dimensions, then the length, sorry, when we are in d dimensions, then the length will be approximately root d. When we go to k dimensions, then the length will be approximately root k. But the pairwise distances between the 2 points will also be preserved. If we go from root d to root k, and the root k here that we have is basically the length of Gaussian. Okay, so we are sort of measuring the length of the vector along a random Gaussian. So this is what we are doing when we do that, and I hope you get the intuition. We are measuring the length of the vector along the or its projection on a Gaussian, and the root k is the length of the Gaussian vector that we have. So so when we project, if you look at the intuition, when we project vector v along the Gaussian, then the length of the projected vector will be root k times multiplied by the length of the vector with high probability. Okay, so what we have is that length of Gaussian was root k, then length of vector is norm of v. So we are saying that the projected length will be root k times norm of v with high probability. So when we project, we get the vector f of v, and we are saying that the length of the projection is root k times v with high probability. Okay, so it is just epsilon times different from that. So this is the main idea, and I think it should be we just use the Gaussian annulus theorem to prove this theorem. Okay, so since we already know norm of v, we can just scale the inner inequalities along both sides. So we can then just say that we need to prove. Okay, so then the next step is that is the observation that u1 dot v, u2 dot v, the vector that we get uk dot v, the individual entries are independent Gaussians. Okay, v is a deterministic fixed vector. That is why we said earlier that it is a fixed vector. So these are independent Gaussian, and this is our f of v, and f of v is a k-dimensional spherical Gaussian. Okay, so f of v is a k-dimensional spherical Gaussian, and the length of a k-dimensional spherical Gaussian that we have already saw from the Gaussian and annulus theorem, that it falls off uh, with respect to ck epsilon square. Okay, yeah, so this is for one dimensional. So the theorem we can there are some details that need to be filled in, so that will be some work for you at home. Yeah, so the big picture is that the probability of the length of the projection differing significantly from its expected value is small. Next, we tie all these discussions together, and they are tied together by the Johnson Linden Strauss lemma. Okay, and the proof for JL lemma is also straightforward because we have proved the random projection theorem. So the lemma, it basically says that suppose we pick an epsilon between 0 and 1. So this is the first step that we have to do. Then given an epsilon, we will pick the value of k. Remember, the one of the questions that we wanted to answer is that how large or how small can the value of k be? In the SVD, the singular value decomposition gave us the best fit for every k. Here, the JL lemma, it is saying that given the value of epsilon and the number of data points that we have, k must be greater than this particular number. Okay. So once we fix our epsilon, that will be a user-defined parameter, and the number of data n, then the dimension of the projection should be greater than the order of log n. Okay, then everything will work out. So what it basically means is that if we have algorithms that are exponential time, when we do random projections and then we rerun those algorithms, then they will be polynomial time, but with slight mistakes or slight approximations in the solution. That depends on algorithm to algorithm, whether those approximations get magnified and whatever. Okay, so the proof is simple. What we will do is apply the random projection. Okay, so first, I have not stated the Johnson-Linden-Strauss lemma. So what it basically says is that then with probability at least 1 minus 3 by 2n, okay, so this is what the statement it says. Then this is the distance in the projected space. Vi minus Vj is the distance in the actual space. The distance in the projected space will be within 1 plus epsilon times root k of the distance in the actual space. Okay, because we already know root k, the number of dimensions that we have. When we are actually implementing it, we will find the distance between the two vectors in the lower dimensional space and then divide it by root k. Okay, so or yeah, something like that we will do. So the proof, we have to apply random projection on random projection theorem on f of Vi minus Vj. Then what we will get when we apply it there, we will have so when we apply it to the random projection theorem, it gives us the following. Okay, so here f of Vi minus Vj and we have Vi minus Vj. Here we had f of v and root of root v. So when we rewrite this inner inequality and we take this term to the right hand side and we take outside common, we will get something like these parameters. Okay, so we'll take root k norm mod Vi minus Vj towards the right hand side, and if we take root k norm mod Vi minus Vj common, we'll have 1 plus epsilon, and on the other hand we will have 1 minus uh, epsilon. Okay, so therefore what we have is that the probability that is outside this region is at most 3 e raised to the power minus c k epsilon square. Okay, this comes through by the random projection theorem. Okay, so now suppose k is greater than natural log of n, then this probability is less than 3 divided by n cube. Okay, so we say that probability that mod f of Vi minus Vj is outside this region is at most 3 by n cube. But this was only for two particular points, Vi minus Vj. We want to find the probability for all possible points. Okay, so for all possible, so we have n choose 2 pairs. That is, we have n minus 1 by too many pairs. So this is less than n square by 2. So we can use the union bound. and say that the probability that mod of f of vi minus vj is outside this bracket for all I and j. For all I and j, I not equal to j is 3n square by 2, which we have as 3 by 12. We can also write it as that the probability of a large distortion is less than 3 by 12. Okay, so that ends what we wanted to prove. With probability at least the large distortion is 1 minus 3 over 2n. So just summarizing the lecture, what we had is that in this lecture we discussed the concept of random projection. So if we have an n cross d matrix, we will uh, we will first pick the distortion that we are okay with. Okay, we will pick the distortion that we are okay with, one parameter epsilon, and based on that epsilon we will then find the value of k, which is given by the Johnson-Lindenstrauss lemma. Once we have found the value of k, then we will fill in this projection matrix, and we will form each column by using independent scalar Gaussians. We will form each column, then we will just multiply it by the data matrix, and whatever result we obtain, that becomes our matrix. Okay, our approximation. So now if we go back to the nearest neighbor application that we have, suppose we have uh, our data is of size n1, and the queries that we might have to answer throughout, they are of size n2. Okay, because we want to find, when we say nearest neighbor, we want to find the data point in our database which is closest to the query. Okay, so when we are doing projection, we have to project both the query and the data point. So we will have n is equal to n1 plus n2, and based on this n, we will find the value of k. Based on this n and the epsilon tolerance that we have, we will find the value of k, and then we will project our database to that k dimension space. Whenever we get a query, we will project that query also to the k dimension and find the nearest neighbor in the k dimension. Okay, so this is important to note that the value of k, it is highly dependent on the number of data points that we have. In SVD, that was not the case because it did not have to do anything with it. So if our application is such that our data might increase later on in the future, so if we project it now, then that projection may not be valid if our data set increases. So it results in some complications. We have to keep that in our head when we are doing it. Yeah. So that is all for this lecture.